So I'm using the flat sheet to cut the front of the gown, and you see this line down here that says hemline. I'm actually going to use the edge of the sheet so that I don't have to hem it. I'm going to line up the hem to the edge of the sheet so that it's already hemmed for us. And then I'm going to cut out this front piece, and we're going to do the same with the back pieces, and we'll cut 2 of those. Okay, so now we have our front and back of the gown cut out already. We're going to now cut out the waist ribbon, which is the super long piece. So the first thing I want to do is pin the front part of my pattern, the front part of the gown, to the back part of the gown. And remember, the back has the opening flap. So I have my front laying flat on the table, and then I have my side pieces here. And I'm just going to pin at the shoulder seam for now. So just doing both sides, pinning the shoulder seam. And then I have my other side here. I'll leave that flat. All right, so we're sewing our shoulder seams now. Just gonna get it all lined up here. So I wanted to show you a really easy way to do the sleeves for this gown. I'm using my old fitted sheet because it already has the elastic on the edge. So it's gonna make it easier for us to create that like fitted cuff. So I'm just gonna lay it out. I'm gonna cut one sleeve at a time instead of cutting them both. So the first thing I'm gonna do is like cut one of the corners. I'm just gonna cut into that corner seam so that I can lay my sheet a little flatter. There we go. I'm gonna lay this down. And you're gonna lay the smaller edge here, on the edge of your gown. And definitely remember to notch the middle half of the sleeve, because that's where you're gonna meet at the shoulder when you start sewing the sleeve to the gown. So this is the piece that I have now. I'm going to cut one more of those. I'm going to clean up the little edge here. Perfect. So we're going to cut one more of those, and then we're going to sew the sleeves to the gown, the body of the gown. All right, so we're ready to sew our sleeves now. So right now we have this kind of thing going on, right? And you have your flaps in the back. So we're gonna line up the shoulder seams here. All right, I'm gonna take one of our sleeves that we have here and find that shoulder notch that I was talking about before. We're gonna line that notch up with the seam, and then we're going to pin. So we're gonna pin the sleeve down until its edge. And you'll remember on your body pattern, you had marked a little notch on the side seam, and that shows us where the sleeve will end on the body. So basically you'll end up with something like this. So along here is where I've pinned the sleeve. This is where my notch and the shoulder seam meet. And then I'm going to do the other side, the other sleeve, and then we'll start sewing. All right, so it is sleeve sewing time. So we have everything pinned, and just gonna sew this up. So now that we've sewn our sleeves on, see them there, we're going to finish up the side seam here. So what we're going to do is sew a seam from the cuff here, and then you can follow it all the way down to the hem of the garment, and that one seam will be super easy for us. So basically you're going to fold your garment like this. You have your sleeve, and we're going to pin all the way down on both sides. All right, so now we are going to sew our side seams and our sleeves. So as you see here, we have our pins going through the sleeve. So what we're gonna do is just start sewing along that edge, and that's gonna close up the sleeve for us and also close up the side seam. So, go. So I actually just wanted to show you where we are now in terms of what we've sewn for the gown. So I'm just gonna flip back here. So don't mind, it looks a little wild right now. This is a larger size than I am, but so we have our sleeves sewn, we have the body sewn, and I just wanted to note that you see here how my cuff is a little big. All you have to do really is, if you want to fit it a little bit better, just pinch out a little bit more in the seam at the cuff edge, and you can just like sew it to make it a little, to adjust the sizing. So I'll probably do that. I'll probably pinch out like 1.5 inches because I have very small wrists. And so what's left now to sew is I'm going to pinch the cuffs, then I'm going to sew the neckband, and I'm also going to sew the belt here and the belt on the back. So just to show you, I have, here's our front gown piece. So it says stitch the belt down. So basically I'm just gonna put a little mark on my sewn garment where I want the belt to be, and then I'm going to stitch that down. So now I'm getting ready to mark where the belt's gonna go on the front of the body. So like I said before, we have this belt placement on the pattern. What I'm gonna do is measure how far that placement is from the high point shoulder. So it's 21 inches from the high point shoulder. So I'm going to take a little marker and I'm going to measure that on my garment. So 21, and then I'm just gonna leave a mark for myself. 21, I'm going to do it on the left and right side. And I'm also going to do it at the center front. So from the center front neck, it is 17 inches. So 17. So now we know where we're going to place our belt. Get rid of this. So So now we have our belt piece here, the very long one. So I'm going to remove the pattern that I have pinned. And we're gonna basically sew this belt closed so that it becomes one long belt. And then we're just gonna top stitch that on top of the front body. So I've taken out the piece here. Ooh, left a pin. Taken off the pattern piece. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fold this in half, and I'm gonna sew all around the edges, and I'm gonna sew it completely closed on one side, and I'm gonna leave one side open because we're gonna have to pull through to, you know, make the belt on the right side. So I'm gonna start sewing that now. All right, so as I mentioned before, we're gonna start making the belt. So you see I have the full width of the belt here. I mentioned I'm gonna fold it in half. So I have it like that. And then I'm going to sew this closed. And then I'm gonna stop at that edge and pivot. Just remember to leave yourself enough of the seam allowance to pivot so you're still sewing like at the correct allowance. And then I'm just gonna keep going. All right, here's the end. I'm just gonna finish at that edge, right? And now I have this long tube. So what I'm gonna do is kind of fold it so that you're turning it, kind of how you make spaghetti straps. And I'm gonna turn the whole thing, and then I'm gonna press it flat and then top stitch that open edge closed. All right, so now we've sewn our band. I finished it on the end, the little top stitch, and I've pressed it so that it's nice and flat. I'm gonna fold it in half. So I have it like this. And I'm going to just put a little pin where the center front is so that I know where to place it on the front of my pattern. And I have my front gown pattern laying here on the table, and I'm gonna take that center pin on the tie and put it on the center marking that we had made on the gown. And then I'm going to pin the tie down all the way to the side seam. And I'm just gonna leave it open, or not open, I'm gonna stop sewing at the side seam because that allows for a little more of an adjustable fit once it's on the person. So I'm just gonna tack it all the way towards both side seams. And then I'm just gonna do a straight stitch to apply the tie to the front of the gown. Then we're almost done. So I just wanted to show you how I have it pinned on the garment and how the tie is pinned. So see, this is the side seam here of the gown, and I've stopped pinning there. This is the center front here, and then this is the other part of the side seam, and I've stopped pinning there. So basically I'm just gonna sew here and all around, but all the edges of the tie that's tacked down to the gown. So we're very close now to finishing. We're at the point now where we are sewing the tie down to the front of the gown. So I've fed it through, and again, just don't sew through the side seam. So I'm just doing an edge stitch, like as close to the edge as I can on the tie. I'm just gonna go along the edge of the tie. All right, I've reached the other side seam now. I'm gonna pivot my garment and my foot, not going through the side seam. All right, so in that way. And then I'm gonna pivot again, doing the other long end of the tie. As close to the edge of the tie as I can get. Alright, so we have our ties sewn. And you see how I left it off of the back? I stopped right at the side seam. So basically the last part of this is to sew the neckline on, and we're also gonna finish, you see those the back flaps there, we're gonna finish that. Okay, so I have our neckband piece. It's a nice long piece. I'll just show you here. Nice long piece. So we're gonna get it ready to be a binding. I like to create a binding from these pieces rather than sewing the binding on as a flat piece. So what I'm gonna do is fold like a 1/4 inch on the edge, one edge. I'm gonna steam it. And I'm gonna do that along the rest of that edge. Then I'm gonna do the other side as well. And try to keep that part that you're folding no more than a 1/4 inch, because we're gonna have to fold one more time. So now that we have those two sides folded, ooh, it's a little hot. We're gonna do one more fold to create a little binding. And you're just gonna do that along the entire portion of the neck binding, and just make sure that the edges meet perfectly, because that's how you're gonna, when you sew it, you're gonna sandwich the neck portion, the neckline of the gown. You're gonna sandwich it in between this little folded piece, and that's when the edge is nice and clean. Once you sew one side, it'll automatically catch the other side. So you just want to make sure that this edge here, those edges, are meeting as perfectly as you can. So now we're ready. All right, so we're putting the finishing touches on our gown. So what I have now is, I want to finish the back portion, the center back of the gown. So I'm taking our neckband here, and I just want to measure it and see how long it is. So I have it at 21 inches. So what I'm gonna do is, I wanna make sure that this neck portion on the gown also measures at 21 inches. So I'm gonna measure the neck. I'm just gonna make a little mark. It's measuring 26 inches. So we have a little notch here, actually, on the back portion of the panel at the neck. I'm gonna fold that middle notch back and then pin it. And I'm gonna do that on the other side too. I'm just gonna remeasure now. See, I've folded it, and now I want to remeasure and see how long it is. And that is 21 inches. So now, as I mentioned before, we're going to take, oh, actually we need to sew down the back edges. So I'm going to pin, we've already pinned the neckline down, and I just want to pin it all the way down that center back line. Do that same fold so it's even. We're gonna pin it and sew straight down that center back edge so that it doesn't flap and so that you have a clean finished garment on the back. So it's about 3 inches wide, that facing that we're basically creating. And we're gonna sew at the raw edge of the fabric. So now we're going to sew the center back facing down. So like I said, we have about 2 inches here. I don't know if you can see, there you go. And we're gonna sew along this edge here, and we're gonna sew as closely to that edge as possible. I'm gonna do that on both sides. All right, let's finish this up. So now all we have to do is we're taking our neck binding, and as I mentioned before, we're gonna open it up, you know, we made it. We're gonna sandwich this part of the gown into the neck. I usually fold the binding in a little bit just so you can kind of clean finish it. I'm gonna sandwich it in so that's nice and clean, and then we're gonna pin it. And we're gonna do that along the entire edge of the neckline here. All right, so we have our neckband pinned from edge all the way around. And we're just going to do a little top stitch on that closest inside folded edge. And just a reminder, like, you should have made sure that your edges were matching up, because now that I'm going to sew here, it's going to catch on the other side. So you should have a perfectly, you know, folded binding. So let's do this. All right. Now we're going to sew on our YKK hook and loop, and then we'll be done. All right, so we're doing the last portion of our gown. We're at the finish line. So what we're gonna do is we wanna make the closure here adjustable so that it's easy for anyone to try on and wear. So we have our YKK kind of sticky hook and loop. So I'm going to cut a portion of this. I think I'm gonna do, let's do like 4 inches. So I'm gonna cut 4 inches. So I have it here. So what I'm gonna do first is on one side of the garment, and we're doing this on the inside of the garment. I'm gonna take the white portion, and I want that facing out towards me. And I'm gonna get that pretty close to the edge, and I'm just gonna pin it in place. And then I'm gonna sew that in a second. And then on the other side, I want the blue YKK portion facing out, because that's gonna stick to the white part. And I'm going to pin that on. And now all we need to do is sew this part, the sticky, onto the garment. If you might have an adhesive sticky version that you won't have to sew, and you can just, it'll automatically stick to your fabric, but the one that I have is not that way, so I'm gonna sew it on today. So now we're sewing on our stick and loop. I'm doing the side that has this YKK section out, facing towards us first. And I'm just gonna sew around the edge. I'm actually gonna put it a little below the neckline, neck binding, just so it's not scratchy. All right, we're gonna do the other side. I'm doing this side with the white portion out. I'm gonna position it here. All right, here's our final gown.